Sony, Canon, Nikon. These are all cameras that people say are hard to use. But there's one camera that's harder than all of them. The Adobe camera. And for editors, this might be the hardest camera to learn. But not anymore. Because in this video, I'm going to show you how to use the After Effects camera to create smooth animations, clean moves, and cinematic motion. Alright, let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new composition. Just go on new composition. For the preset, just choose social media landscape HD. It's going to be horizontal, frame rate 30 frames per second, duration, let's go like 10 seconds for now. And yeah, that should be good. Just press OK, just like that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a camera to our scene. So we're going to right click, go to new, and then go down here to camera. Now this prompt will appear and you're going to have a bunch of different options to choose from. So the first thing we're going to look at is a type over here, and over here we have 1-note cameras and a 2-note camera. So for this case, we're going to just be using the 1-note camera, and that's going to be the camera type that most of you guys are going to be using for most of your edits. Over here we have the focal lengths, so you can see over here a bunch of different measurements. We're not going to go too deep into it, but you want to choose something between 35 and 50 millimeter. That's usually like the best focal length, or like the normal focal length. I'm just gonna go with 35, and then yeah, everything else can stay how it is, and then just press OK, and then just like that we have a camera in our scene. Now the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go over here, right click, and we're gonna add a text layer. So I'm just gonna call this point 1. So to center this, what you want to do is center the anchor point, just press Ctrl Alt Home, and you see the anchor point goes to the middle of the text layer, and then you can press Ctrl Home to center the entire text layer in the middle of our scene. I'm going to duplicate this by pressing Ctrl D, just like that, and then I'm going to move it to the right. I'm going to call this point 2. So I'm just going to move these from here to here, and then what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go highlight both of these text layers, and then I'm going to make sure they're in 3D layers. Also, by the way, if your screen doesn't look like this, if you don't have these settings showing over here, just make sure you're pressing on these buttons down on the bottom left side of the screen, and then if you press on them, it just opens all these other settings and parameters over here. Now I'm going to also go over here, right click, go to switch view layout, and then you press on 2 views, and then you're going to have this other view which we're going to be using to actually like move around. It's going to help a lot. Just make sure when you press on this, go down here and make sure you're on custom view 1. Now with your keyboard, you can press on 1 on your keyboard, and this allows you to rotate around in your scene. You can press on 2 to move around in your scene, and then you can press on 3 to kind of zoom out and zoom in into your scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out a bit, rotate it just like this, and then maybe what you can do is now you can press on, like, for example, point 2, and then you can just move it out of the scene just like that. Then maybe you can move this one in the middle, something like this. Control Alt Home and Control Home, and then maybe you can even move point 2 a bit more in front just like this. Let's see, maybe move it a bit more to the left. So yeah, so you can also do this, by the way. You can come over here, open this up, go to transform, and they can move the text layer just like this over here if you don't want to move them like on the screen with these arrows. But I like to move them over here because it's just way easier to kind of visualize. So now let's move from this from looking at this text layer from point 1 to point 2. And how we're going to do this is we're going to go open this up, go to transform on the camera, we're going to press on position, add a keyframe just like this, and then we're just going to go to 1 second, and then we're just going to start moving the camera to the right, and then we see until we see point 2, and then we're going to zoom out. We're going to, by holding this, we're going to zoom out a bit, move a bit up just like that, and then just like that we went from point 1 to point 2. Now you can see that it's a bit too like linear. It doesn't look too good, the camera movement, it's not too smooth. And so the reason why is because these keyframes are linear keyframes, meaning they're just going in a straight line. There's no difference in speed, it's going at constant speed. And so how we can change this is by using the speed graphs. And so what you can do is you can highlight these keyframes, or you can just press on the position over here. You can go up here to graph editor, and then you're gonna have this. And so the first thing you want to do is actually you want to right click and make sure you're on the edit speed graph, because you can also edit it on the value graph, but that's too hard or too complicated right now to look at. So we're just going to go with the speed graph. And then what you can do is you can also go back, highlight these, and then just press F9. And what that does is it does something called like an easy ease. And so it just turns the graph into kind of like a parabola, just like this. And so now what you can do is you can start messing around with the keyframes. You can move it like this, or move the graph like this and like this. And so what this basically means, what this graph says is from here to here, so the x-axis is the time. So from this time to this time, it's going to go pretty slow. And then when it reaches the middle, so around like 0.5 seconds, it's going to speed up really fast. And then from here to here, from 0.5 seconds to 1 second, it's going to speed up really fast over here and then slow down a lot. So it's going to be really fast in the middle, but then at the edges of the at like near 0 seconds and 1 second, it's going to be pretty slow. So let's just watch and see what it looks like right now. See how the camera movement, it's very slow at the start, then it speeds up, then it goes to 0.2. Now another thing you can do is you can move this all the way to the right, just like that. Maybe move it a bit to the left. So what happens is it's going to be really fast at the start, and then it's going to slow down at the end. And this is actually one of the graphs that I use the most in my edits. It starts really fast and then slows down. And so what this looks like is this. That looks pretty smooth. And then another graph you can do is you can start it really slow and then it speeds up all the way to the end. Just like that. So now that we know how to go from point 1 to point 2, so now let's add point 3 and 4 and start creating smooth movement between all of these points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate point 2, then I'm going to move it over here, somewhere over here. Then I'm going to just double press and then make sure it spells out point 3. So I can just come over here and zoom in as well. And then we're going to duplicate point 3 again, move it to the front, change it over here, even change it and call it point 4. And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start messing around with its rotation. So I'm just going to mess around with the Z and Y rotation. And same thing over here. I'm going to mess around with this. Kind of turn it into like a weird rotation. So right now we have point 1 to point 2. So what most people are going to do in this scenario is to move to point 3. They're going to use the camera, go over here, and then like let's say at 2 seconds, they're just going to move the camera all the way to the right and then zoom out. And then let's say if we start messing around with the orientation. So actually before you even mess around with the rotation, make sure you have keyframes over here for the orientation and rotation. So when you come over here, you actually can move it just like this. Now the issue is, look at how it looks like right now. You see how when you go over here to here, there's like a very sharp movement. It like stops and then it quickly moves to point 3. This is the reason why camera animations look really bad. And so what we actually have to do is we're just going to first delete all of these keyframes. I'm actually going to move this a bit down. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to move the camera layer up over here, and then we're going to right click and add something called a null object, just like this. And then I'm going to change this to a yellow color. And so what a null is, it's an invisible control layer that doesn't render, so it doesn't show in your final video, and it only exists to control other layers. And so what I mean by that is, first of all, when you're pressing the null layer, make sure it's a 3D object, just like this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go on our camera layer, we're going to press on this, the pick whip, and then under parent and link, make sure you're not pressing it under the track mat. So you're going to press and hold and then drag it onto our null 1, just like this. And then it will say over here, it's parented to null 1. And so now, if I press C over here to see the keyframes, and so what we're going to do now is overlap our keyframes to make sure the animations are smooth. We all want motion since, you know, motion brings flotion. I don't know. Anyways, so what we're going to do here is we're going to press P on our null layer. And then right before it moves, so right before this last keyframe, we're just going to add a keyframe for position. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a keyframe, another keyframe around 1 minute and 15 frames, and then we're gonna move it over here to 0.3, zoom out a bit. Then we're also gonna have to add keyframes to orientation. So to do that, what we need to do is make sure you go to the first keyframe under your null layer, then press on orientation in X and Y and Z, then go to this keyframe and add keyframes for the orientation and the rotations. Then now maybe we can try to level this. So now what we're gonna do is we're also gonna highlight all of these and then make sure it's kind of the same keyframe as this. So for this, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna make this kind of like a middle graph, something like this. And then I'm gonna go to these, highlight all of them, press on the graph editor, press F9. Sorry, highlight them all and then press F9. And then go back into the graph editor and then just highlight all of these keyframes. And then make sure they're also kind of like a middle graph, something like this. And then let's go back and let's just watch and see how it looks like now. So yeah, you see how that looks very smooth? It doesn't really stop, it just, the motion keeps going. So we can even like move this a bit farther or move this a bit more back. So let's watch now. So that looks good. Now to go to 0.4, we're gonna add one more null layer. So we're gonna go over here, new null object, and then we're gonna do the same thing all over again. We're gonna change this to yellow, and then we're gonna parent now. We're gonna parent the, we're gonna make sure actually it's a 3D layer. Then we're gonna parent null 1, 2, null 2, just like that. And then now I'm just gonna press U to just see where the keyframes for null 2, null 1 is. And then I'm gonna start adding keyframes for null 2. So I'm gonna press position and rotation. I'm gonna add keyframes over here, somewhere like at the 70, like here near the end of the keyframes of the previous null. And then I'm gonna go in front to like around over here. So it's gonna move this down and out. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of messing around. Maybe we can even come over here. And then just so I can see where my camera is. Okay. Okay, so something like this. Okay. So now again, same thing, we're gonna highlight all of this, press F9, and then I'm gonna go to the graph editor and then just make sure it goes in the center somewhere, like something like this. So it looks like that. And then go back out and let's just see how this looks like now from the start. So you see how the keyframes are overlapped. So you have the original camera movement from point 1 to 2, it goes till here. And then from point 2 to 3, it starts a bit before the last keyframe of the camera 1, and then from point 3 to point 4. So let's just watch this all together. So now let's say you guys have more points like 5, 6, and 7, and basically you want to move the camera to more locations on your screen. Again, you're going to be doing the same thing. You're just going to keep adding more null layers and just keep parenting them and making sure they're on 3D layers, and then just like overlapping the keyframes over each other. And so in some compositions and some edits, I have like maybe like 50 different null layers. So it really depends on how insane your animation is. But yeah, that's like the best way to get really these smooth animations. And then also, of course, you can highlight all of these, press on this to make sure there's motion blur, and then make sure this is like highlighted. And so now there's going to be motion blur, it's going to look a bit nicer. And yeah, that's basically it. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys want more tutorials, let me know in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.